Before you die, there's something you need to understand. Not because it will make you feel better, but because it will break something inside you that was never meant to survive. Not your spirit, but the illusions that have quietly shackled it. You've been told what life is, what success looks like, what love should feel like, and what happiness is supposed to be. But these definitions were never yours. They were whispered into your ears by voices that didn't know you, shouted by systems that don't care for you, and reinforced by a world too busy to stop and question its own madness. The truth is, most of what you think you know about life is built on sand, soft, pleasing, and entirely unstable. There is a kind of courage, a rare kind, that doesn't roar. It doesn't fight with fists or march with banners. It sits quietly, face to face with reality, and refuses to look away. That's the kind of courage we need now, because the truth isn't gentle. It doesn't comfort you. It doesn't hold your hand. It breaks you so that you can finally be whole. We live in a world where masks are worn more often than truth is spoken. Smiles are polished, Instagram filtered, and perfectly posed. Success is flaunted like a trophy, even when it feels hollow inside. Love is romanticized to the point where people would rather chase fantasy than stand in the rawness of real connection. And happiness? Happiness has been hijacked, turned into a marketing tool, sold to you in the form of things you don't need, promises no one can keep, and dreams that aren't even yours. But here's the raw truth, the one you'll only hear when everything falls apart or when you've had enough of pretending. The world has lied to you, not out of malice, but out of habit. Generations passing down survival strategies disguised as truth, traditions rooted in fear, standards designed not to liberate but to keep you running in place. We are more connected than ever, yet more lonely. We are flooded with knowledge but starving for wisdom. And perhaps the worst part is that we have started to believe the lie is the truth and forgotten how to tell the difference. You've been taught that your goal should be comfort, that safety, ease, and stability are the markers of a successful life. That if you can just avoid pain, avoid risk, avoid discomfort, then you've made it. But this is the first and most dangerous trap, because comfort, while soothing, is a silent thief. It steals your fire, numbs your purpose, and convinces you that mediocrity is enough. It tells you that it's okay to shrink your life to fit the mold others designed. It persuades you that struggle is a sign of failure rather than the birthplace of greatness. Let me tell you this, not with judgment, but with clarity. Your comfort zone is not your sanctuary, it's your cage. It's the quiet place where dreams decay. It's the polished prison where the fire of your potential quietly suffocates. Every time you choose ease over effort, safety over soul, you place another brick in the wall between you and the life you were meant to live. You don't have to look far to see it. People trapped in jobs they despise because the paycheck keeps them warm. Relationships built on habit rather than heart. Talents buried beneath routine. You've probably done it too. Settled, compromised, shrunk yourself to fit into spaces that never felt like home. Not because you're weak, but because you were taught that survival is more important than thriving. But there's another way. It's not paved with guarantees. It doesn't promise applause or comfort, but it will wake you up. It begins the moment you step outside what's familiar. The moment you choose challenge over certainty. It's in the cold shower that reminds you you're alive. It's in the shaky voice that speaks up when silence would have been easier. It's in the decision to try, knowing you might fail. Because failure isn't the enemy. Stagnation is. Growth is messy, it's uncomfortable. It's raw and full of risk. But it's also where life begins. Not the life they sold you, the real one. The one where you feel deeply, risk honestly, and live fully. Where your days aren't defined by what you own, but by what you become. And becoming requires sacrifice. It demands that you walk away from the illusion of safety and step into the wild terrain of your potential. Ask yourself, what have you traded for comfort? What dreams have you placed on the shelf? What truths have you silenced in the name of peace? You weren't born to tiptoe safely to death. You were born to wake the world with your presence, and that awakening doesn't happen in comfort. It happens in confrontation, in the fire of change, in the honesty of hard choices. There was a time in my own life when I lived wrapped in comfort. A decent job, a predictable routine, a steady paycheck. On paper, everything looked fine, but inside I was drowning, number distant from myself. I knew something had to change, so I left. I let go of security without a map, and yes, it was terrifying, but it was also the beginning, the real beginning. I failed, I struggled, I doubted, but every bruise became a badge of truth, every misstep a lesson. And somewhere in the chaos, I found clarity. I found myself. That version of me, the one who finally chose discomfort over decay, he's the one writing this now. And if you felt the same gnawing truth, the same inner whisper that there must be more, then you already know what I'm talking about. You felt it in the quiet moments, the restlessness, the ache, the question, is this all there is? That question is your soul knocking on the door of your life. So open it. Say yes to the unknown. Say yes to the discomfort. Let it reshape you. Because the version of you that the world is waiting for, they're not hiding in your comfort zone. They're waiting on the other side. The world doesn't need more polished perfection. It needs more truth. It needs people willing to strip away the lies and stand bare in the light of who they really are. Not perfect, not certain, but real. People who have stopped performing and started becoming. And that becoming, it begins now, with one step, one breath, one truth that you're finally ready to face. You are not meant for a life of quiet resignation. You are not here to fit in. You are here to wake up, to shake the dust from your bones and step boldly into the life only you can live. But you'll never find that life inside your comfort zone. You'll find it in the stretch, in the struggle, in the sacred discomfort of becoming who you were always meant to be. So tear down the walls, shatter the illusion, and walk into the fire of your own becoming. Not because it's easy, but because it's the only thing that will ever be real. There comes a moment in every person's life when the mirror doesn't lie anymore. Not the mirror on the wall, but the mirror inside. The one you've spent years avoiding, covering up with distractions, numbing with entertainment, drowning with tasks and obligations. That mirror holds the version of you you were meant to meet long ago. And when you finally face it, there's no filter, no excuse, no more waiting. It simply shows you who you are and who you could have been had you dared to live without fear. We all wear masks, some of them so well crafted, we forget they're masks at all. The successful professional who is quietly suffocating, the perfect parent who secretly doubts their worth, the social butterfly who goes home every night and feels unseen. We learn to survive in costumes. We call it being strong. We call it being functional. But deep down, something in us knows we weren't made to survive. We were made to live. And living requires honesty, not the kind you speak to others, but the kind you whisper to yourself when the world gets quiet. The kind that shatters your stories and confronts your lies. It's easy to say, I'm fine. It's much harder to say, I'm lost. But that moment of raw truth, that's the beginning of freedom. Because you can't rebuild until you admit what's broken. You can't awaken while still pretending to be asleep. We become masters at distracting ourselves from discomfort. We scroll, we binge, we overwork, we underfeel. Anything to avoid the silence where our truth lives. But silence isn't the enemy. Silence is the doorway. It's where the noise dies and the soul begins to speak. And what it says, though it may hurt, is always worth hearing. You were not born to be buried in obligations that drain you. You weren't created to chase validation like a thirsty ghost in search of a home. You were not put here to fit someone else's mold of what a good life looks like. You are a spark of something ancient, something wild, something so infinite that even the stars can't compare. But somewhere along the line, you forgot. You forgot when they told you to stop dreaming and start doing. You forgot when your authenticity was labeled too much. You forgot when survival required you to shrink, to dim, to conform. And the forgetting didn't happen all at once. It was slow, it was subtle, but it was deadly. Because every time you silence your truth to be liked, every time you betray your soul for acceptance, you die a little. Not in body, but in spirit. And here's the tragedy most people live and never name. They don't die once. They die in pieces, with every abandoned dream, every muted feeling, every compromise that stole more than it gave. Until one day they wake up surrounded by the life they built and realize it doesn't belong to them. It was assembled from expectations, crafted out of fear. It looks successful, but it feels empty. That is not your fate unless you let it be. You can still remember. You can still return. There is a place inside you that never forgot. A voice that still calls you, even if faintly. It doesn't shout. It doesn't demand. It waits, patiently, for you to be still enough to hear, for you to be brave enough to answer. That voice won't lead you down the path of ease, but it will lead you home, to yourself. The path home is not paved with clarity. It is lit by courage, and courage is not the absence of fear. It is the decision to move anyway, to rise anyway, to speak anyway, to create anyway. Courage is saying yes to yourself even when the world has only ever told you no. And it begins with a question, one that only you can answer, but one that can rewrite your entire life if you dare to sit with it. Who are you? Without the mask, without the title, without the need to prove anything to anyone? Who are you in the dark? When no one is watching, when no one is clapping, when it's just you and your soul? You might not have an answer right away. That's okay. You're not supposed to. The point isn't to answer it quickly. The point is to finally ask it honestly. And when you do, you'll begin to notice the subtle ways life starts to shift. The people who once felt magnetic begin to lose their pull. The habits you once clung to begin to feel hollow. The routines that numbed you start to feel like cages, and in their place, something else emerges. A hunger, a yearning, not for more, but for real. Not for noise, but for meaning. You'll find yourself drawn to stillness, to art, to nature, to conversations that go beyond the surface, to moments that make you feel something. You'll begin to see beauty where you once saw obligation. You'll begin to cherish time, not waste it. You'll begin to speak your truth, even when your voice trembles. And yes, some people will leave. They will say you've changed. They will say you're not the same. And they'll be right. You're not. You're becoming. And becoming always disrupts comfort. It always rattles the cages others hoped you'd never outgrow. But don't shrink. Don't go back. Don't dim your light to ease someone else's discomfort. If your becoming makes them uncomfortable, let it. That's not your burden to carry. You were not put on this earth to be agreeable. You were not born to be small. You are here to shake things, to challenge what's false, to awaken what's true. And the only way to do that is by first waking up in your own life. No one else can do this for you. Not your parents, not your partner, not your mentor. This is your path, your work, your truth to claim. But here's the beautiful paradox. Though the work is yours alone, you are not alone. The moment you commit to truth, life begins to meet you. You'll start to notice synchronicities, unexpected kindness, teachers hidden in strangers, moments that feel like messages. The universe begins to echo your intention because life doesn't respond to perfection. It responds to authenticity. When you show up, not as who you think you should be, but as who you really are, doors open. Not always the ones you expected, but always the ones you need. There will be tears, there will be fear, there will be loss, but there will also be joy. There will be peace. There will be a stillness so deep it quiets every storm you used to drown in. And in that stillness, you will finally hear yourself. Not the self shaped by fear, but the self born of fire. The one who remembers, the one who dares, the one who lives. You don't need to know how it ends. You just need to begin. Begin by listening. Begin by choosing. Begin by becoming. Because this life, this one precious, fleeting, sacred life, it isn't waiting for you to be ready. It's waiting for you to be real. There's a quiet war being fought in every human soul, a war between who we've been told to be and who we were born to become. This war doesn't scream in public squares. It doesn't make headlines. It lives in the pauses between conversations, in the thoughts you silence before they fully form, in the ache that follows you after you smile. It's a battle that plays out in our choices, in our silence, in our dreams deferred and voices hushed. And the tragedy isn't that we fight this war. The tragedy is how few of us ever win it. From childhood, we are trained, sometimes gently, sometimes brutally, to obey, to conform, to follow paths laid down long before we were born. Do this, study that, be like them, fit in. Don't question, don't feel too much, don't stand out too far. And in our yearning to be loved, to belong, we comply. We fold in our edges. We dress up our wounds. We become versions of ourselves that win approval but lose soul. And for a while it works. You get praise, you get safety, you blend. But slowly, silently, the cost begins to mount. It starts as fatigue, then restlessness, then a quiet sense of loss that you can't quite name. Until one day you look in the mirror and realize you've become a stranger to your own reflection. Not because you failed, but because you've forgotten what it feels like to move from your own truth. Forgotten what it's like to create without fear. Forgotten how to speak without filtering every word through the lens of what others might think. Forgotten that you were born with a voice, with fire, with a dream etched into your bones that no one else can live for you. And it's in that moment, raw and disorienting as it may be, that something sacred begins. The remembering, the return, not to who you used to be, but to who you were before the world told you who to become. This path is not linear. It doesn't come with maps or guarantees. It will require you to unravel, to unlearn, to walk away from stories you've worn like skin. Some of them were handed to you by parents who never healed. Others were shaped by cultures obsessed with productivity over presence. And some were born from your own fear, crafted to protect you, but now keeping you small. Shedding these stories is not painless. It is grief. It is letting go of identities you've clung to because they made you feel safe, even if they also made you feel invisible. It is saying goodbye to parts of yourself that served a purpose once, but now only stand in the way. And yet, with every shedding, you gain something more precious than comfort: clarity. You begin to feel what is real. You begin to hear your own voice beneath the noise. And though it may be cracked and unsure at first, it is yours. And there is power in that. Reclaiming yourself is not a single moment of epiphany. It is 1,000 small choices made daily, often in silence, often without applause. It is choosing rest when the world demands hustle. It is speaking your truth when silence would be safer. It is creating for the joy of it, not the likes. It is trusting your path even when no one else sees it. And as you walk this path, you will begin to notice the illusion falling away. The illusion that you need to be more to be worthy, that you must do more to be loved, that your worth is measured by your output or your image. None of that was ever true. What is true is this: you are already enough, not because you've achieved some ideal, but because you exist. You breathe, you feel, you care. That is enough. That has always been enough. You were never meant to be a machine. You were never meant to live a life of endless to-do lists and shrinking joy. You are not a brand. You are not a role. You are not a resume. You are a living, breathing miracle. Flawed, complex, beautiful, and no one else can be who you are meant to be. There is a light inside you, buried maybe, dimmed perhaps, but never extinguished. That light doesn't need permission. It doesn't need perfection. It only needs presence, attention, a willingness to turn inward and say, I remember you. I see you. I am ready to walk with you again. And when you begin to live from that light, from that space of authenticity, everything begins to shift. Not because the world changes, but because you change. You begin to attract what aligns. You begin to lose interest in what doesn't. You stop chasing validation and start embodying truth. You begin to move with purpose, not just productivity, with presence, not just performance. And this doesn't mean life becomes easy. It means life becomes real. And real life is messy and beautiful and wild and tender. It is full of failure and grace, of beginnings that look like endings and endings that open into something unexpected. It is full of laughter that rises after tears and love that finds you when you're not trying to be lovable. This is the life you were born to live. Not the curated version, not the controlled one. The raw, unfiltered, imperfectly perfect one. The one where you say what you mean, where you show up even when you're scared, where you stop waiting for permission and start claiming your space. Because no one is coming to save you from the life you built by default. No one is going to hand you the keys to your own soul. That is your work. That is your honor. That is your liberation. So take a deep breath. Let go of who they told you to be. Step into the vast unknown of your becoming. There is power there. There is peace there. There is you, undiluted, unafraid, unforgettable. And the world needs you, not the you pretend to be, the real you, the one who remembers, the one who dares, the one who knows that truth, no matter how quiet, is always enough. It's strange, isn't it? How we spend our lives building castles out of expectations. Brick by brick, we lay down the plans that someone else drew up. Study this, work there, marry that, buy this. Smile more, speak less, be grateful but not too loud about it. And by the time we step back to admire what we've constructed, we realize it's not a castle at all. It's a prison made of invisible bars. Beautiful, yes. Admired, perhaps. But built on everything we were told we should be, not what we ever truly wanted. And the most terrifying realization of all is that we agreed to it. Not consciously, not with malice, but with the slow surrender of self that happens when you're praised for following the rules and punished for questioning them. Somewhere between trying to make others proud and trying to avoid being too much, we lost the thread. We abandoned the wild, untamed, deeply honest version of ourselves for one that's easier to manage, easier to predict, easier to applaud. But ease was never the goal. Aliveness was, and aliveness is not convenient. It doesn't show up on time or follow the script. It doesn't keep quiet or stay clean. It arrives like a storm, raw, undeniable, electric. It demands that you pay attention, that you stop numbing, that you truly feel what you've spent years trying not to. And it dares you to change everything. Because deep down you've always known, the job that drains you, the relationship that no longer feeds your soul, the habits that steal more than they give, the potential that keeps whispering your name while you pretend not to hear. You know, and knowing is both a curse and a gift, because once you know, you can't unknow. You can't return to sleep without hearing the ticking of the clock you once ignored. That's the cost of waking up. The world doesn't change immediately, but your relationship to it does. You start to see through things. The conversations that used to excite you begin to feel hollow. The distractions lose their flavor. The endless scrolling leaves a bitter taste, because now your soul has gotten a glimpse of its own reflection, and it wants more. It wants depth. It wants truth. It wants freedom. But freedom is not found in rebellion for its own sake. It's found in responsibility, the kind that comes not from obligation, but from self-respect. It's when you finally stop asking, "What will they think?" and start asking, "What do I need?" It's when you stop begging for permission and start giving yourself the authority to choose differently. And choosing differently doesn't mean becoming someone else. It means unbecoming everything you're not. This process is not glamorous. It's not always inspiring. It often looks like quiet nights filled with doubt, like tear-streaked faces staring at ceilings asking, "Why does this hurt so much?" Like walking away from people who meant something, simply because staying would mean abandoning yourself again. It's brutal, it's lonely, and yet it's the most sacred thing you'll ever do. Because on the other side of that loneliness is a kind of connection you've never felt before. A connection not built on pretending or pleasing, but on being seen, truly seen. And when you're seen like that, flaws and all, raw and real, you begin to realize that you were never hard to love. You were just offering yourself to people who couldn't hold what you carry. You start to find your people, not because you finally became worthy, but because you finally became visible. They recognize you because you stopped hiding. You stopped filtering. You showed up as the story, not the summary. And real people are drawn to real stories, not highlight reels. And suddenly, the world doesn't feel so suffocating, not because it changed, but because you did. You're no longer chasing belonging, you're embodying it. You're no longer trying to fit in, you're realizing you were never made to. This is the shift the world needs. Not more noise, not more performance, but people who have the courage to be exactly who they are, regardless of who that unsettles. People who live with their hearts unarmored, their minds unshackled, their presence unapologetic. This is not about being loud. It's about being true. You can be soft and still be strong. You can be kind and still have boundaries. You can be quiet and still take up space. Your authenticity doesn't need to announce itself. It radiates. And when you begin to live this way, something miraculous happens. You become magnetic, not because you're trying to attract anyone, but because you're finally aligned. You've stopped orbiting around other people's expectations and started becoming your own center of gravity. And people feel that. They don't always understand it, but they feel it. And those who are meant for you will rise to meet it. But even if they don't, you will be okay, because you're no longer living for them. You're living for the truth that pulses in your chest, for the joy that doesn't need justification, for the peace that doesn't come from approval, but from integrity. And that peace, it's not loud either. It doesn't shout or demand attention. It sits with you in the stillness. It walks with you when no one claps. It anchors you when everything else wobbles. It becomes the foundation upon which you build a life, not a performance. This kind of life won't always be easy, but it will be worth it, because it will be yours. Not borrowed, not inherited, not copied, yours. So let the world keep spinning in its madness. Let others play the games they need to play. You have chosen something deeper, something quieter, something that cannot be bought, sold, or staged. You've chosen truth, and truth, no matter how inconvenient, is the only path that leads home. You're not behind, you're not broken, you're not late, you're right on time. Because this moment where you decide to stop hiding is the beginning of everything. Somewhere along the winding path of existence, we are taught to carry what does not belong to us. Expectations, guilt, unhealed wounds passed down like heirlooms. The weight of what others could not face in themselves, now resting on your shoulders. And maybe you've grown strong enough to carry it all. Maybe you've learned to smile while holding it, to keep going, to be the dependable one, the strong one, the one who never falters. But strength, real strength, is not measured by what you carry. It's measured by what you're willing to set down. There comes a point when you have to ask yourself, whose voice is guiding my choices? Whose fear have I made my own? Whose dream am I chasing that doesn't even belong to me? These questions are not comfortable. They tear at the threads of the life you've carefully stitched together. But they are necessary, because what's the point of a life perfectly assembled if it's built on silence, on denial, on a self you no longer recognize? We've been trained to admire the hustle, to worship the grind, to view exhaustion as a badge of honor. But all it leaves us with is a full calendar and an empty soul. You weren't made to be a machine. You weren't born to be efficient. You were born to be alive. And being alive doesn't mean productivity. It means presence, depth, feeling everything, even the things you've been told are too much, especially those. They tell you to shrink your feelings, to be polite, to be agreeable, to keep things light. But there's nothing light about pretending to be someone you're not. There's nothing graceful about suppressing your truth so others can stay comfortable. You are not here to be palatable. You're here to be whole. And wholeness includes the fire and the flood, the joy and the grief, the beauty and the bruises. So take off the armor. The world convinced you that you needed it, but it was never for your protection. It was for your conformity. And all it's done is keep the world from seeing who you really are. And maybe you've been told that who you really are is too much, too emotional, too intense, too deep. But let me tell you something no one else has dared to say. Those very things you were shamed for, they're your power. Your depth is your compass. Your emotions are your truth. Your intensity is your aliveness, refusing to be flattened. Let the world call it too much. It means you're not easily digested. It means you weren't built to be consumed and forgotten. You were built to be felt, to be remembered, to leave something behind that isn't just noise, but resonance. And you don't do that by hiding. You don't do that by shrinking. You do that by choosing the terrifying path of authenticity, the one with no applause, no guaranteed outcome, just you, your truth, and the willingness to risk being seen. It takes courage to live this way, to say no when it would be easier to comply, to leave when it would be safer to stay, to speak when silence would be rewarded. But every time you choose yourself, you write a new story. Not just for you, but for everyone watching who hasn't yet found the words. Because there's always someone watching, a younger version of you, a friend on the edge of their own becoming, a stranger who sees your light and remembers their own. And that's how change spreads. Not through perfection, but through permission. Through someone daring to say, I will no longer betray myself to make others comfortable. That's what you're doing now, whether you know it or not. You're stepping out of the old script, the one that said love must be earned, that success must cost your peace, that worthiness is conditional. You're rewriting the rules, and it's messy, it's painful, But it's real, and real is where life begins. Let yourself grieve. Grieve the years spent performing. Grieve the opportunities missed because you were too afraid. Grieve the relationships where you gave more than you had, hoping it would finally be enough. That grief is not weakness, it's sacred. It means you're finally telling the truth. And in that truth, you will find liberation, not the kind that comes from escaping your life, but the kind that comes from finally being present in it, from finally saying, I am enough as I am, even if no one claps, even if no one stays, even if all that comes of this is that I can breathe without choking on my own silence. That breath is everything. It's the start of something that can't be undone. A life lived from within. A life where you no longer chase moments, you create them. Where you no longer wait for peace, you choose it. Where you no longer seek permission, you move from conviction. And yes, some people will misunderstand you. Some will call you selfish, dramatic, unrealistic. Let them. Their judgment says more about their fears than your truth. You are not responsible for their comfort. You are only responsible for your integrity. Integrity is not about being flawless. It's about being aligned, about making choices that reflect who you are, not who you're trying to please, about walking away from what looks good in favor of what feels right, about becoming someone your younger self would recognize with pride. And when you live this way, something inside you heals. The parts that once begged for validation begin to quiet. The wounds that shaped your choices begin to soften, and the noise that once kept you running begins to fade into the background. You no longer need to prove yourself. You just need to be yourself. That shift changes everything, because now you're not chasing life, you're dancing with it. You're not surviving, you're creating. And your creation is not for everyone. It's for the few who can meet you in the depths, who aren't afraid of your intensity, who don't flinch at your truth, who see you, not the role, not the mask, not the version that plays well to the crowd, but you. And in that seeing, you will remember, this is what love feels like, not performance, not pursuit, but presence. Two people standing naked in their truth, saying, I see you, and I'm not afraid. That kind of connection doesn't come from pretending. It comes from becoming. And you're becoming more real with every breath, more free with every choice, more alive with every truth you choose to live instead of deny. So keep going, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. You're not just changing your life, you're becoming the kind of person who reminds the world what it means to truly live. There are days when it feels like nothing is working, when your effort seems to dissolve into silence, when the people you thought would stay begin to slip away, and the dreams that once felt so certain now flicker like fading stars. It's in those moments, heavy and quiet, that you begin to wonder if any of it matters, if the pain is worth the price, if this path of authenticity, of soul-honest living, is just another myth dressed up in poetic language. And in that wondering, in the shadows of that doubt, there's a choice to make. Not between success or failure, but between sleepwalking and staying awake. Because it's easy to fall back into old patterns, to seek the comfort of numbness, to return to the crowd and its noise, even if it means silencing the part of you that aches to be heard. But easy is never what you came for. You didn't crawl through the wreckage of your past to be mediocre. You didn't rise from heartbreak and betrayal just to be accepted by people who don't even know how to see you. You came for something more. You came to remember what it means to be fully, unapologetically alive. And aliveness, true aliveness, demands presence. It demands that you stand in your pain without turning away, that you face the parts of yourself that still tremble in the dark, that you sit with the silence long enough to hear your soul whisper, I'm still here. It won't always roar, Sometimes that voice is barely audible, buried beneath layers of exhaustion, fear, and noise. But it's there, patient, unmoving, waiting for you to stop running, waiting for you to come home. Coming home to yourself is the most courageous thing you'll ever do, because it means you stop abandoning the parts of you that others rejected. It means you choose to belong to yourself even when it means not belonging to them. It means you stop asking, will they stay if I show them who I really am? And start asking, will I stay with myself if I keep pretending? That shift, subtle, seismic, is where everything begins to change. Not because the world suddenly becomes kind or easy or fair, but because you're no longer willing to abandon yourself just to make it through. You begin to recognize the sacredness in your own presence. You stop apologizing for your intensity, your hunger, your depth. You stop shrinking your joy to protect someone else's bitterness. You stop translating your truth into language that makes others feel comfortable. And in doing so, you become more than a person surviving. You become a force, not loud, not angry, but rooted. Rooted people don't chase, they don't beg, they don't perform. They stand, they rise, they listen, they choose. And maybe for the first time in your life, you choose you, not the polished version, not the one they love for being agreeable, the real you, the one who cries easily, who dreams wildly, who speaks truth even when it trembles on the edge of your lips. This kind of choosing is not selfish, it's sacred. Because when you choose yourself, you're not just healing your own life, you're breaking a chain. You're rewriting a story that generations before you never had the courage to question. You're creating space for others to say, if they can do it, maybe I can too. There will be days when you question it all again, when you miss the comfort of belonging, even if that belonging came at the cost of your soul, when you crave the numbness that once kept you safe. That's okay. You're human. You're healing. Don't mistake the ache for failure. It's just the echo of the old life, fading. Let it fade. Don't chase it. Don't mourn it. Don't reach back for what you outgrew. The pain of expansion is real, but so is the joy that follows. The kind of joy that doesn't need permission. The kind that arises not from circumstance, but from integrity, from knowing that you didn't betray yourself today, that you stood in your truth, that you honored the voice within, even when it shook. There's a kind of quiet power that comes when you stop explaining yourself, when you let people misunderstand you, when you realize their perception is not your responsibility. You free yourself, not to be reckless, but to be real, and realness will cost you. Let's not pretend it won't. You may lose relationships built on roles. You may walk away from jobs that stole your light. You may outgrow environments where your truth is treated like a threat. But what you lose in comfort, you gain in clarity. Clarity about who you are, about what you value, about where your energy belongs. And with that clarity comes peace, not the peace of everything being perfect, but the peace of not pretending anymore. You'll find yourself walking through the same world with new eyes. You'll see beauty in broken places. You'll hear wisdom in silence. You'll feel the sacred in the ordinary, because presence makes everything holy. You won't need to escape your life to find meaning. You'll find it in your breath, in your steps, in your stillness. You'll laugh again, not the polite, rehearsed laughter, but the kind that bubbles up from somewhere deep. You'll cry, too, not from helplessness, but from honesty, from the relief of no longer holding it all in, from the recognition that tears are just truth in liquid form. And through it all, you'll keep becoming, not into someone new, but into someone whole. That wholeness is not perfection, it's inclusion. It's making room for every part of you, the brave and the broken, the tender and the fierce, the loud and the quiet. Because you are not here to be one thing. You are here to be everything you are without apology. And when you finally begin to live like that, the world doesn't just look different, it responds differently. Not because it changed, but because you did. You stopped waiting for permission. You stopped outsourcing your worth. You stopped living like you were a problem to be fixed. You remembered that you are the answer you've been searching for, that you were never lost, just layered. And now, layer by layer, breath by breath, you are coming home. The most powerful moment in your life will not be when someone finally chooses you. It will be when you no longer wait to be chosen, when the longing to be seen dissolves, not because you've stopped caring, but because you've started seeing yourself fully, without filters, without conditions, without the constant ache for external confirmation. That moment doesn't come with fireworks or applause. It arrives in silence, in solitude, in the quiet decision to stop abandoning yourself every time it gets lonely. Because it does get lonely. This path of awakening, of unbecoming who the world taught you to be, it's not crowded, it's not filled with hand-holding and cheering. It's filled with space to meet yourself again and again, without distraction, without roles. You will lose people, but you will also lose the version of yourself that needed those people to survive. And what remains is the truth. You never needed them to be whole. You just needed you. The reason so many people fear solitude isn't because they dislike being alone. It's because they fear what they'll hear in the quiet, the doubts, the disappointments, the truths long buried. But solitude is not your enemy. It's your initiation. It's where your real voice gets louder, where you stop being a stranger to your own soul, where you realize that all this time you weren't waiting for the right person or the right opportunity. You were waiting for the courage to sit with yourself and listen. And when you listen, really listen, you'll hear what you've always known, that your worth is not a negotiation, that your value does not require evidence, that the love you've been trying to find in others is not out there. It's here, in the way you treat yourself when no one's watching, in the choices you make when no one applauds, in the promises you keep to yourself even when they're inconvenient. That's the revolution, not in changing the world, but in reclaiming yourself, in choosing honesty over performance,